on this computer, and then we're going to let folks in. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Rethink 794 presentation. My name's Greg May. We're just going to let folks have a moment or two to get into the room. I appreciate everyone taking time out of your busy day to join us. We probably should have worked with Zoom a little bit more. We were going to be excited to get 50 or 60 people to join us. And then we had a number of people register at the last moment, thanks to all the news coverage. So folks will be coming in. You should be able to rename yourself, but we cannot unmute or start your video. I think it would probably crash my computer if we did that. But feel free to post questions in the chat. We're going to find some time at the end to get around to them. So without further ado, I'm just going to go ahead and get the ball rolling. Like I said, we're the Rethink 794 team. We're made up of local grassroots advocates, some volunteer architects, and we're really excited to have Ben Crowther from America Walks join us today. Just a brief overview. Like I said, I'm the Transportation Policy Director at 1000 Friends of Wisconsin. You can find our website posted there, and I think it'll be posted in the chat in a moment. But we're just a land use and planning organization that was founded in 1996, really trying to focus on making healthier, more sustainable, and thriving communities in Wisconsin. And we also run the Active Wisconsin program, which is kind of as a collaboration of Wisconsin communities who are interested in promoting walking and biking in their communities and just sharing resources that way. And so we'll throw that link into the chat as well. A really great program that my colleague Susan runs, and she'll be here running tech and hopefully answering any tech questions you may have. So without further ado, we'll just jump into the presentation. We're going to start off with Ben Crowther from America Walks, who joined this presentation early on, or joined our team early on, just providing some best practices and advice and connecting us to folks across the country. He runs the Freeway Fighters Network, which is a collaboration of communities across the country and groups that are working to rethink downtown highways. And then we'll move in over to Zhang and Taylor Korslin, who are volunteer architects and landscape architects who have donated so much of their free time. I'm really appreciative of them pulling some late nights to help make this a reality. They really are the heroes of this project. And then I'll wrap it up at the end with some ways to get involved and what are some next steps. Without further ado, I'm going to throw it over to Ben. So feel free to start sharing your screen and run away with it, Ben.
Thanks, Greg. Great to be here. This is very, very exciting to see another group join the national movement. Ignore all the junk on my backgrounds, and there we go. Is this looking good, Greg?
Looks great, Ben.
Great. Yeah, so as I said, I'm Ben Crowther. I'm the advocacy manager for the national nonprofit America Walks. In America Walks, we're dedicated to helping build walkable, equitable, connected, and accessible places in every community across the United States. The type of places where people are able to walk safely and enjoy each other's company and gather as a community. And we work with local groups and coalitions like the Rethink 794 project and 1000 Friends in all 50 states. So rethinking 794 might seem like a radical idea, right? Demolishing a highway that exists downtown, but it's actually not. So we at America Walks, we work with a nationwide coalition called the Freeway Fighters Network. And this is a number of local coalitions across the country who are either fighting against highway expansions in their communities and advocating to reconnect communities divided by highways. So you can see the map here of all of the different coalitions that are out here working towards these causes. And each of these communities have realized the environmental, economic, and social damages that highways have caused and still cause today. And each of these groups as well is calling for a better way forward. So what you see on the map here, each of those red dots is a group that's fighting against the highway expansion. I believe Milwaukee is one of those red dots as well with I-94. Each of the blue dots is a community that's advocating for a large-scale cap or cover of their highway. And then each of the green dots is a community working towards removing that highway and reclaiming its right of way for community benefits. And Milwaukee has, of course, 794, the Rethink 794 coalition, as well as some of the work being done with the Stadium Freeway there. So this is a diverse group. There are small cities and suburbs that are on this map, places like Erie, Pennsylvania, Norman, Oklahoma, Poinciana, Florida, if anyone's ever heard of there. And there are big cities too, San Francisco, New York City. And then as you can see, there's everywhere in between, including Milwaukee. So rebuilding cities by removing highways has really become an idea that's entered the mainstream, and it's making headlines like all of these that you see here on your screen. Now, there's so much momentum behind this movement that the federal government, through two separate bills now, has allocated $4.4 billion specifically for removing highways for community benefits. And the US Department of Transportation has signaled that it's willing to allocate even more funding from other sources beyond these dedicated programs to achieve this goal. So recently, this is Detroit's I-375. US DOT just recently awarded a grant of $104 million to the Michigan Department of Transportation to remove this highway through downtown and replace it with a surface boulevard. There are a few other projects like this in the pipeline. In the upper left, you see Syracuse, New York, I-81. The New York State DOT there has just committed to remove this elevated highway and once again creates a surface boulevard that links the two different parts of the city back together. In the bottom right, you have I-980 in Oakland, California. Here, the city is leading the charge to once again remove the highway and build a connected street in its place. So I want to just show you, these are all projects that are happening now, right? And that where there's commitments on either a city's behalf or a state's behalf. But I want to show you a few examples of what's possible based on other cities that have already actually gone ahead and chosen to remove highways, and what have they built in the highway's place. So this is San Francisco's Embarcadero freeway along the waterfront. That tower there you see is the terminal ferry building. It doesn't exist anymore, a rather hated highway, so much so you can see this really awkward termination here. That's because of a freeway revolt during its original construction, where community members stood up and said, we don't want to continue building this highway along the waterfront, and that project was actually stopped. So it had an awkward termination. And finally, it met its end in 1989 when the Loma Prieta earthquake severely damaged it. At that time, it was carrying about 80,000 cars a day. That's more than what 794 carries now. And even though there was that amount of traffic on it, the city of San Francisco decided it was not worth their efforts to rebuild it. They wanted to reclaim their waterfront. So this is where the Embarcadero was. The Embarcadero freeway, at least, was. Now this is the Embarcadero, the boulevard that replaced it. So you can see not just used for moving cars quickly, but a lot of people, pedestrians out and about on the street. There's activity. It's a place to be. It's a destination. This is Boston, Massachusetts. This is I-93, the central artery that used to really chew up a lot of space downtown. It's wide, it's expansive, it's massively gray. And Boston and the state of Massachusetts took the novel step back in the 90s to bury the highway. Cost a lot of money, the big dig. I don't think anyone's out there trying to replicate it these days. But the real upside of this is Boston was able to turn that gray space into green space. This is the Rose Kennedy Greenway, which the city has built in place of that elevated I-93. It links neighborhoods across downtown and into the north end of Boston. And as you can see, once again, it's a popular space for people to hang out with friends and family, meet up, enjoy a nice day in the sun. And the last example I just want to show you is Rochester, New York, because Rochester's done a really great job of gathering data out of the highway, their highway removal project. This is the Inner Loop East in Rochester, New York, sunken highway. A project or a conversation started back in the 90s to actually get rid of this highway. And finally, in 2017, the city got funding from the federal government to do so. In doing so, the city was able to reclaim 6.5 acres of land from the highway's right of way. And here's work in progress, what that looks like. It cost $25 million to remove the highway and rebuild Union Street. That's this street running north-south here. And in the first 2 years alone, on that $25 million investment, the city attracted in this corridor $229 million in economic development. And Rochester's gone and it's built out all of these parcels. That's come up to 534 apartments on the land, about half of which are below market rate or affordable. It's added 52,000 square feet of commercial space, not just for any businesses, but businesses that neighborhoods residents said they wanted to see, things like a pharmacy, things like a daycare center. The transformation project, it's funded social programs. So there's housing for elders here, housing for people living with HIV, housing for ex-offenders who are re-entering the workplace. And in terms of employment, the projects create about 170 permanent jobs in those first 2 years and over 2,000 construction jobs. So Rochester really makes the case, I think, data-wise, what the benefits are of converting highways into boulevards. And you come down to street level, and this is a place, once again, that you want to be, a great streetscape. It changes how people get around. So Rochester's been getting data on this too. So Union Street has this two-way protected bike lanes, got great clear signaled crosswalks, bike racks, benches, trees, all the good things that you want to have a street. And this is paying dividends. So the city's seeing a 50% increase in walking in this corridor now, and a 60% increase in biking. And what that also comes with is a decreased reliance on cars and all the costs that come with them. The financial costs and sometimes the human cost when people drive dangerously. So the inner loop removal has been so successful that the city's actually now pursuing removing the northern part of the highway too in Rochester. So those images from San Francisco, Boston, and Rochester, they really illustrate the range of possibilities for what you can build in place of a highway. And the renderings you're going to see next for 794 corridor, they're also possibilities. But I think, as you'll hear from our other present panelists, they're not set in stone. They're meant to inspire and fuel new ideas from you all. So I encourage you all, as you think about and see the renderings for the corridor, think big and be bold as you work towards a great future for Milwaukee.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ben. We really just appreciate you taking time and sharing your experience. He really has a knowledge of, all of the, projects that are happening around the country. This isn't just something that's being explored in Milwaukee. This is something that communities across Wisconsin or across the country are looking at. And we really appreciate you bringing that context and just for being so generous with your time today. So just kind of moving through this, just to provide a little bit of context about why we're here. And I promise we'll get to the pretty pictures soon, but I'll bore you with a few little background details first, which is that the DOT is proposing $300 million replacement of these bridges listed here in orange, kind of starting in 2024. And so this is on top of about the $250 million they spent doing the rest of the parts in blue. So, this is an enormous investment in our community. And if these, bridges are replaced, they could be here for another 50 years. So we're at a really critical juncture for the next stages of Milwaukee. And so we posted this online and we saw just a bunch of people getting really excited about 794. And we're like, well, maybe there's something here in Milwaukee. Maybe there's some energy we can tap into. We followed that up. We went and looked at the downtown plan comments. We saw a ton of people commenting on the downtown plan update that's happening right now, saying that 794 should be, rethought. In fact, it was the most popular comment on the entire interactive map they had. And we just started having conversations online. A bunch of people started posting about this, really excited, just a ton of energy around it. And then we started meeting with folks on the ground. We were going to urban spaceship events, meetups with urbanists, and just a lot of people energized on the ground level as well. And so we decided to start this Rethink 794 campaign because of that. And we thought that this was a practical site to do this as well. This is just a map of the traffic in the area. We see that during the morning rush hour, more people are coming in off the Market Interchange and from the HOAN Bridge than are exiting. In fact, about 4 times as many people are coming over the HOAN Bridge in the morning than are exiting. And that tells us that people are using I-794 to access downtown, but not to travel through it. And so this is an enormous piece of infrastructure that's designed to carry people through it, but it's not being used in that way. And the traffic counts when you get to the river are pretty much identical to the traffic counts on the Stadium Freeway, which the city and county and the DOT have announced that they're going to be studying as a boulevard. So, if they saw something there, they could certainly see something here as well. And just some background on what this cost us. More than 6,000 homes were destroyed when we were building our freeways. We displaced almost 20,000 people during their construction. And you can see here on this GIF that shows kind of what happened between 1956 and 1976, that this highway carved through the core of downtown and started, emptying out some of these neighborhoods that had existed. It obliterated our street grid. It cost us something that's lost that we can't get back. And we're hoping that this project will be a restorative project, kind of reconnecting these neighborhoods and grids. But I always just feel like it's important to remind people that, people lived here. This was a thriving community. There were businesses and religious communities. It was part of an LGBTQ scene that was also destroyed. So there was a thriving community in this place, and 794 helped to destroy it. And so along the way, I see a lot of familiar names in this list of participants. We had a lot of conversations with people. I had about 40 plus Zoom meetings with people, stakeholders, people on the ground. And it eventually led me to finally meeting with Peter Park, who was the former planning director who helped get the Park Freeway taken down. And he regrets that we weren't able to get I-794 done as the mayor had wanted to do then. He said, we had a chance and there was so much opportunity. There's so much land. So this is a conversation we've been having for a very long time, and we'll continue to have moving forward because a lot of people think it's a good idea. Just again, some more local context. The Park East Freeway was about 0.8 miles. And it was removed for $45 million. When you adjust that for inflation, that's approximately $80 million today. So, when we're talking about spending $300 million just to repair and replace a highway, $80 million seems a little cheaper. Like maybe this is actually a fiscally responsible decision. There was about 24 acres of land that was opened up from that project, and they've seen about $1.1 billion worth of investment. And more is planned along the way. And we can start to see the map filling in. It took a little bit of time, but there's a lot of development happening now. And I don't think anybody would argue for bringing that highway back. And we're seeing a pretty similar thing happening along 794. So I'm going to throw it over to Taylor, our volunteer architect, who has taken a lot of time to do this, and he's going to run through kind of some of that context.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Yeah, what we saw in the Park East Freeway project and what we see here is the urge of development. This east-west stretch of I-794 is full of opportunity to reimagine what could be. Nowhere else in the state are multiple 30-story developments going up directly adjacent to interstates, and multiple headquarters are moving to this area. It's apparent that people want to be here, and we're trying to open that up for a debate because it is such a unique opportunity. Our vision is practical but bold. We're trying to connect two of Milwaukee's best areas that it has going for it, two of its destinations in the downtown and the third ward. And with this interstate being some obtrusive infrastructure, it's one of the most unique places that the DOT will study. We understand the importance of the connections, particularly the arterial of the HOAN Bridge to the southern Milwaukee community. We want to maintain that and not limit any access, but rather provide more access, connecting the grid and providing more arterial connections, even on 6th Street, possibly. We expect the DOT study will largely propose moving a few ramps, this type of incremental or broken up development opportunities that they've continually been trying to move forward with. But we'd like to see them expand their limited view of this project and make sure whatever we replace this infrastructure with is what we want to see in the next 50 years. So we strive to show a boulevard from the HOAN Bridge stretching to the 6th Street, because we identified this as a possible arterial that's currently disconnected and underutilized. So these are the connections and what a development might possibly look like in that area. And the possibilities for this space are there's already momentum around the public market, this being a destination, and BRT lines talk about development and the HOP streetcar. Again, if we simply replace what we have and move a few ramps, this is the continuously what we'll get. The unknown, however, is the possibilities given to the opportunity to develop this land. This is a view from Lake Michigan, and what may be possible given a replacement could be, live work neighborhoods connecting the third ward and downtown. The momentum of each of these places as a destination could spur a lot of development. And I want to highlight in this view that we've shown the HOAN Bridge touching down at the intersection of CLYBOURN and Lincoln Memorial Drive, which would ultimately be, I think, a smoother integration with the city. And then along that boulevard would be all these connections to the grid and disperse traffic throughout. So, not all the traffic that currently goes down I-794 east-west would be on this boulevard. It would, be to where people want to actually go. Like Greg said, people arrive here and leave here, but they're not passing through. Again, this view shows what exists today, looking at the lake towards the east. And what could be. This boulevard along CLYBOURN Street is an extended outdoor market. the possible scale of development that would blend the urban fabric from the Third Ward to Milwaukee's downtown. So I'll pass this over to Sue now.
And Sue, you're muted if you were trying to speak. Sue, we cannot hear you. Can you hear us? There you are.
Can you hear me now? Okay, sorry.
Yeah, great.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sue Zhang. I'm a landscape architect and urban designer with Doverco and Partners. So I just shared my screen, and you can see my screen right now, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. So my introduction to the project is the first time I'm looking over the highway from the soapwork loft. And I'm amazed at this great barrier between downtown and the Third Ward. And there's historical photos I later found at the PRITZLAFF loft that shows the historical buildings that is at the land where the interstate highway sits today. I'm really amazed like how much historical fabric has been erased to create this elevated highway 60 years ago. And as Greg mentioned, we're at a time that the highway is about to be rebuilt. And can we imagine a different future for this elevated urban highway area? And I think from the renderings that Taylor showed earlier, the answer is a really resounding yes. And many people have doubts about like, what can we do about federal land? Because from my past personal project experience, back in 2019, I have worked on the downtown Oakland plan. And in the downtown Oakland plan, we had included ideas about recreating the I-980 highway as a multi-way boulevard at grade. And the campaign started at grassroots level, and it has gained tremendous support throughout the city. And we have created visualizations like showing a connected community replacing the elevated highway. And Taylor has showed many great like renderings looking at this area from higher ground. And I want to and I created a few visualizations showing what this area could look like at the ground level. And why we're focusing so much on the streets, because we think like the city streets really decide like whether the cityscape looks dull or looks interesting. And the issue with CLYBOURN Street today is that all the space are dedicated to automobiles, and there is really very little space left for walkers, pedestrians and bikers and public transit. And as a result, you can see there is very little people walking on CLYBOURN Street today. But if we are imagine this area to be replaced, if we imagine the structure to be replaced as an at-grade boulevard, we will have the chance to reallocate a space to pedestrian activities, to cyclists, and also we will have we can create a new development facing the street, creating a frontage that's much more interesting, that creates a much more interesting urban environment and promote walkability and street life. And of course, the rendering I show is one of the many possibilities of what a boulevard could look like. And in fact, the rendering I showed kind of draws inspiration from the first block of CLYBOURN Street as it stands today, from the Lincoln Memorial Drive to Van Buren. So the city has recreated this first block of CLYBOURN Street as a two-way boulevard. It is a part of the Gateway Improvement Project. And what I did is simply continuing this pattern. However, there's many other possibilities to reimagine CLYBOURN Street. the city is also promoting having a new BRT system running throughout the east and west side of Milwaukee, and the CLYBOURN can also have dedicated bus lanes and have like on-street parking and various other use, because this area is all public owned land. So I like the campaign. The name of our campaign is called Rethink 794. We don't talk about, because it's not about a highway removal project. It's an additive project that we're focusing on creating new values and increasing the quality of life. And what Taylor and I have been trying to do is really just to start a conversation about what kind of Milwaukee that everyone wants to see for the future. And this slides, I kind of zoom in around the Broadway near in the Third Ward and the public market area. And we can see like there in the last 5 years, there has been tremendous development happening around in this area. And however, the highway in the middle like really creates a donut hole of development but if we are replacing the highway with an aggregate boulevard, we will open up tremendous opportunity to create connection between Third Ward and the public market. And the public market today already draws about more than 1 million visitors per year. And it is a very logical location for an expansion. Is to have the logical expansion can happen around this parking lot where public market stands today. And if we look around the similar markets across the country, such as the Pike Street Market in Seattle, and or the Findlay Market in Cincinnati, there's often like areas very walkable with pedestrian access and mixed-use development. And I think that's a possibility for the public market area here in Milwaukee as well. And this is a photo. This photo is taken standing at the back door of the Milwaukee Public Market, looking at its parking lot today, facing the HOAN building and the hotel. And so this rendering kind of shows the idea of how pedestrian-focused alley with mixed-use development can look like in the future, where we can have like flexible outdoor space and mixed-use developments. We can have like branding and murals and string lights to activate the space. And I've saw many people. I've also talked with many people doing like some of the planning meetups, and a lot of people had concerns about like land sitting vacant for decades. And I've seen this is a case study I have seen personally in Miami, in WYNWOOD. So WYNWOOD is an area that's up and coming, but back in 2015, WYNWOOD Yard area is just a vacant lot back then. However, the zoning of this land allows for 190 units of development. But at that time, the market value and rental and sales does not justify the development at that time. And the city of Miami created a temporary use permit for the WYNWOOD Yard that really allows them to have a variety of different business and activities, but without the stringent zoning requirements. And WYNWOOD Yard was able to host like outdoor concerts, community events, and having incubator space for local culinary businesses and entrepreneurs. And it's a great success for the area. And following that, currently, actually, the WYNWOOD Green like finally committed to turn this area into a 189 unit development. And it's under construction as we are speaking today. And there are also like similar techniques and similar installations we have seen in Milwaukee locally, such as the ZOCALO food truck area in like Bayview, and the outdoor dining and food trucks and installations have really activated a vacant area back in Bayview. And this area, as Greg and Taylor has mentioned earlier, has really a unique opportunity for the city of Milwaukee, because the 32 acres of land mostly is all publicly owned land, and we have the opportunity to guide what kind of a future development we want to see in this area in the future. And instead of like the Park East development, we have seen like development taking place in super blocks and happening at large scales. We can alternatively like promote like small scale developments in this area that happens incrementally. And there are many possible uses we can promote in this area, like such as small museums, local restaurants, makerspace, boutique hotels, installations, etc. This is a really unique opportunity to make downtown a complete neighborhood, because we can, to achieve the goal of having 1 million Milwaukeeans living in downtown, we really need to make downtown livable and we can fill in the uses that, and maybe having more green space for dog park. This area opportunity for develop. And from here, I'll pass it back to Greg, and he will talk more about the potential development value for this area.
Great, thank you, Sue. If you could stop sharing there for a second, I can. There we go. And hopefully your folks can hear me. My internet is being a little bit feisty today. Of course, of all the days that I need it, it's having some problems. So I've shut down the chat for a quick section. I'm hoping that might help a little bit too, for my computer to handle a Zoom meeting with 150 people. But, you know, as Sue was talking about, you know, the desire to, the mayor, you know, recently said, I want to, you know, make this a city of 1 million people or more. And how are we going to do that? You know, obviously that'll take some work in all of our neighborhoods and thinking about holistically as the city, but also, you know, kind of thinking about the fact that parts of downtown Milwaukee in the 3rd Ward actually were growing. They grew at 17% between the last census tracts, and actually this census tract itself is the 6th fastest growing census tract in the state. So if we're thinking about, you know, if we're going to reach 1 million Milwaukeeans, I would say kind of feed the hot hand, or as my brother who used to work in the music industry would say, don't quit a hit. And so we started looking at doing some analysis about, you know, how much land is there, what can be developed. And there's about 32.5 acres of publicly owned land under I-794. And this includes properties that are owned by the DOT, by the county, and by the city. So this is an enormous amount of space that could be developed, and how that gets developed will be determined, you know, hopefully by the community as this project moves forward. But we worked with a local real estate analyst, Pecor, who gave us this, or Pecor, who gave us this kind of rough template to use, just to try and figure out how much development value was out there. And we collected a bunch of new construction projects that were in the area to kind of come up with an average value. And so we broke that down by, you know, a certain percentage. We said, you know, knowing that work from home has changed, maybe it's less office, maybe it's more apartments. saving some space for new parking and for green space. And that opened up, all of these new acres to land, to development. That final number became about $1.5 billion. And Robin Palm, who understands taxes much better than I do, gave us just a rough estimate that's saying this could add about $15 million to the city on an annual basis in terms of tax revenue. So this is a project that will not only open up new land for development, but strengthen the tax base as well. So, if kind of getting up and wrapping up before we jump into some questions, I would just encourage folks to get involved. I love this quote, get involved. You don't want to look back on your life and realize that you successfully managed to stay out of it. The goal of our project is to get the city of Milwaukee to just study a boulevard, commit to doing a boulevard study. What would that look like? Where would this, how would this traffic flow change? What could this development look like? Get into the community, have conversations. Do we want to be expanding the public market? Do we want to be having more open space? Is this affordable housing? Is this regular development? These are conversations that'll come from that study. And hopefully it will, create a development along I-794 that is reflective of the community. And so the downtown plan update is happening right now. In November and December, there's going to be a draft release of the recommendations. So if you haven't yet, go onto the city's website, and I think hopefully Susan may be posting that in the chat. Join those open house conversations. Get on the map. They have an interactive map. Add your comments there, and we'll keep you informed about when that meeting is happening. Hopefully, we can get folks to show up in November and December to see what those draft comments are. The other half of this is that the DOT is also going to be reviewing this. We're expecting public meetings to start in 2023, and you can add comments now. I certainly see advocates and opponents of this project in the chat. So, this is, I guess, the overall goal for our team is just to broaden this conversation. So feel free to have a comment, whether you like this project or not. We want to get people engaged. So, we'll be keeping folks tabs on these meetings. We'll be sending them out, making sure people can get engaged. And we want to make sure that the Boulevard alternative gets its fair shot. The DOT has committed to looking at a Boulevard alternative, but, we want to make sure that of the 4 alternatives, this one really gets a fair shot. It gets looked at because we're trying to do something a little bit different here. And then, the last ways, other ways to get involved. You can write to your older person, let them know that you're interested in this project, that you'd like to see 794 rethought, and same for your county supervisor. You can join our mailing list. I think Susan will post a link. You can find our mailing list on our website, rethink794.com. Be active on social media. This is a popular conversation on Twitter and on Reddit, and it's maybe a little more contentious on Facebook. So I'm asking you to dig in deeper and maybe get onto some of those conversations on Facebook and show that there are proponents there as well. And of course, tell your friends and family, share this with them and talk to folks about it, why you think it's a good idea, because, every single conversation keeps the ball rolling. And, even the most minor, writing to your older person makes a huge difference. So we're going to open it up to questions. My internet hopefully has stopped being a little bit rough on the edges, and I'm going to turn the chat back on. But yeah, if you have questions, we have some more information on rethink794.com. We have a press release that's out there, so you can go find a copy of these renderings for the press who are in the room today. That press release has a link to the renderings. It has a description of what they are, photo credits and everything. You can, of course, send an email to me. I'm greg@1kfriends.org. I'm always happy to answer questions. And give us a follow on Twitter at No More 794. That's where a lot of our activity is happening. So feel free to open up these questions in chat. We'll work our way through them as best we can, knowing we've got about 15 minutes to do these. And I'll stop sharing my screen and we can get our panelists back on here to share their faces. And I'll go ahead and start pinning folks just so we can make sure we're at the right place. And I'll pin myself. And Sue, I need you as well. Have you turned your video on? Maybe I'm missing it in here. Okay, well, I will work to get through that after I'll send our first question over. Well, let's see here. Lots of questions in the chat. Lots of comments too. So feel free to post your questions in the chat.
Greg, I was looking through these comments, and one that was brought up a few times is, if I'm a South Shore resident, how many minutes would this add to my commute if I was to take the route that went east-west along this boulevard?
Feel free to jump in with those questions. Yeah.
Sure,
And-
I can quickly answer that question. I guess I don't really have an exact answer, but because we're as Taylor and Greg showed in the area, the corridor area that we are about to change is about 1 mile. So I can imagine, I don't have like the exact traffic data of how much time this will add to your commute time, but you can pretty much imagine, instead of getting on the highway, driving that 1 mile, you will be probably driving through some traffic lights. So I couldn't imagine it being more than a few minutes. So I expect it will be, the traffic time might add a few minutes, but however, I doubt it will be longer than that. Maybe.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, 2 to 3 minutes would be added, and in the future, we can expect to maybe see smart traffic lights, autonomous vehicles, that kind of thing that, may influence street grid patterns. So, if you weigh the benefits and the cost of a few minutes added for the substantial development and growth in the city that could happen.
I'll add for observations from elsewhere across the country. I've done this. And the highest average annual daily traffic counts of any highway that's been converted into a boulevard was 93,000 cars a day. That was in San Francisco's Central Freeway. And in every case where a highway has been converted into a boulevard, Carmageddon has not manifest. And that's because boulevards are actually really good at carrying traffic. Boulevards can easily, a well-designed boulevard can easily carry about 6,000 cars an hour or so. That puts you on par with a highway at rush hour, So I think, we've seen in other cases that this Carmageddon does not manifest when you go ahead and convert highways into boulevards.
Yeah, maybe a follow-up question for you, Ben. Someone is asking, are you familiar with the CLYBOURN Park in Dallas? Maybe the integration of highways with public amenities. Are you familiar with this project? I am not.
Yeah, the CLYBOURN Park in Dallas. What that is I think it's a several acre cap of a highway in Dallas. And it's a solution that improves the corridor. It certainly has made it more attractive and improved quality of life for residents there. The only issue I would say with the CLYBOURN Park in particular is it leaves you still get the underlying effects of the highway for the rest of that corridor, and that you've capped that several block extent, but still you have the pollution, you have the disinvestment that comes with highways along the rest of that corridor. So it's an improvement for a small part, but without addressing the underlying issues or problems.
Thank you. Maybe a question for Taylor or Sue. We have a question about the bridge, particularly either both the pedestrian bridge and also the new Boulevard bridge that would go over. With so much additional river traffic causing the bridges to open more often, what would that mean for the project?
Yeah. Well, obviously, we'd like to, bring that bridge of the boulevard up as high as possible to limit the amount of times that it would, have to open. I believe some of the bridges open for smaller boats and others just for the largest kind of touring boats. So you could kind of expect the same, but a modified hybrid that would allow boat traffic to go through, but not be raised as much as the rest of the bridges.
Great. And then I have a question that's been bumped up a couple of times. I will repin you here. So this might be a question for me even, but is wondering if the DOT or the Department of Public Works has any info on the traffic impact when 794 was redone a few years ago. I think that's referencing when it was taken down, whether or not there was an enormous traffic impact. That's a good question. I'll have to follow up with the city folks. I've heard anecdotally, and Ben kind of referenced too, that this kind of Carmageddon didn't come into fruition. And I saw that on some comments on Facebook, that then when they were able to navigate that pretty easily. And that seems to be, as you mentioned, Ben, that's correct, kind of has a theme across the country where when these are taken down, there's kind of a lot of fear that maybe traffic will explode, or it'll cause a ton of problems, but it doesn't seem to manifest. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. There's been, we have some decent studies on what happens to the traffic when you make one of these conversions. And from those studies, it's basically comes to this about, this was one particular study, this was with the Central Freeway in San Francisco I mentioned earlier. 66% of the traffic went to another freeway, 11% went to other streets, some switched to transits, and then a fifth of the survey respondents that came back here said they just took fewer trips since the freeway closed. So they skipped, discretionary trips. Instead of driving to get, milk at the corner store, you rolled that trip into a larger trip to the grocery store. And on average, trip distances increased about a mile.
Yeah, thank you for that, Ben. And we as a project team are not, we're aware when we make a list of kind of positives and negatives, we knew that there might be an impact to people's daily commute. It might increase, your time by a minute or two. And we may be having to look at how truck traffic is routed. And that's something we're hoping to work with the city of Milwaukee and with the DOT on finding answers to what those kind of solutions could be. But those are the major, negatives. It's just a slight changing in people's driving and commuting patterns. But the positives include, reconnecting all of these neighborhoods, bringing in a ton of development, reducing air and noise pollution, better pedestrian and biking connections, $1.5 billion worth of development and strengthening the tax base. And so, to us, it's a no-brainer, but I understand that this will have an impact on people's lives. And so I understand the passion people are having for these comments. Chris asks, how will a boulevard handle 40,000 trips per day? It's a good question. We see that the city of Milwaukee is looking at the Stadium Freeway, which handles about 67,000 trips per day. And so if they feel it's feasible there, certainly could be feasible here. I don't know, Ben, or if anyone on here has any knowledge on what average traffic counts are like on other freeways, and is this an abnormal place, I suppose, for a boulevard? I don't know if I lost Ben.
I'm still here. I would say, this is moderate traffic for a highway. Certainly not far from the upper realms of the highway world. There are boulevards certainly out there that do and are capable of handling 40,000 cars a day. I think, the other thing too that makes this project appealing is that 794 too is not, it's not like I-94. It's not a larger part of a interstate or highway network. It's more similar to the Park East Freeway and how it works with the other adjacent highways around it.
It's a really great point. I do want to reiterate that Greg mentioned earlier about the traffic pattern. Like only half of the people, less than half of people are using this highway to pass through downtown. A majority of people using the highway to getting to and out of downtown. So it shouldn't really having the most impact on people who are, it shouldn't have the impact for people who are trying to get into and out of downtown.
Great. So kind of just some closing thoughts. Thank you everyone for attending today. I'm going to throw it over to Sue and Taylor and Ben. I don't know if you want to give just a 1-minute recap on what you're thinking. And we just want to thank everyone who came today, and especially give a shout out to Ben, who's volunteered his time to do this, and to Taylor and Sue, who donated their time to do this and working late nights. I mean, I really appreciate it. So Sue, I guess we'll start with you. Just one quick, I don't know if you have a last minute thing to throw in here before we wrap up at 1.
Sure, I can. Yeah, I think Greg, you had asked us to put in the press release of like what kind of statement we want to leave at the table. I guess, like, I think what I wrote down is 60 years ago, we created this highway because that was the best imaginable possible use we can come up with. But at this new millennium, in this national context where people are converting highway into walkable communities, is this elevated highway still the best possible use of this land? And those highway projects have a really long lifespan that really outlived a person's life. And I think it's really time for us to think about what kind of legacy we want to leave for our children or even the next generation to come. And I think I can just leave with that, and I can pass it to Taylor and Ben. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. I would mirror everything that we've said again with, the opportunity that is there, that, you can replace this freeway and kind of see the same thing, that Milwaukee will be that way for the next 40 to 50 years. Or you can give it a chance and push for this boulevard, and maybe it's a compromise. It's not a full boulevard to 6th Street, but the more we push, the more people will hear it, and we can kind of choose for ourselves as a community what this can look like in the coming decades to come.
Yeah, and Ben.
Yeah, I think I just want to say that I've really appreciated how everyone here has made this a conversation. And this is a conversation about priorities and what the future should look like here. So keep that conversation going and continue having this discussion. And I think that's the way where you can build a consensus around this, and you can see that a project that Rethink 794 has the power to really raise all boats and be beneficial to everyone who's living in Milwaukee and its environs.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think this to me just seemed like a no-brainer. We're about to be spending $300 million on a replacement project, and Park East was taken down for about $80 million. There's just so much. It's not only does it make fiscal sense, there's so many benefits to it. And so it just seems like a no-brainer to us. And so thank you to everybody who has participated in this conversation. We're going to be recording this. We'll be sharing it out there. And we just appreciate everyone taking time out of your busy day to join us. We appreciate that. Give us a follow online. And thank you for everyone who's been interested in Rethink 794. Bye.